They never intended to wake up with thoughts of you filling their mind. Not like this, not with this kind of intensity. They had a plan, a whole system they built to keep things manageable, to keep you at arm's length, to make sure nothing got too real. But plans collapse when you're not paying attention. And somewhere between last night and this morning, something broke, something that can't be put back together the same way again. Here is what most people won't tell you about emotions. People don't embrace them when they arise. They reject them. They question them. They bury them beneath logic and pride and carefully constructed walls, because what they feel for you doesn't fit the version of themselves they're trying so hard to maintain. That gap between who they are and who they are pretending to be, that's where all the damage happens. And last night that gap finally became too wide to ignore. I think you felt it, didn't you? That shift, that invisible current running just beneath the surface. Not confusion, exactly, but something far more dangerous. Recognition. Yeah, recognition. The moment when denial stops being a choice and becomes impossible. Let me tell you exactly what actually happened, because this isn't about romance or destiny or any of that easy stuff. This is about the moment someone's psychological defenses finally gave out completely. They have been fighting this for months, maybe longer. Every time you came to mind, and you come to mind constantly, whether they admit it or not, they'd push you away. They'd rationalize it. They'd convince themselves it was just attraction, just curiosity, just circumstance. Anything but the truth. Anything but the truth. Because the truth demanded something they were not ready to give. Vulnerability, exposure, a surrender of the control they have spent years perfecting. But here is the psychological reality nobody talks about. Repression. Yeah, repression isn't erasure, it's pressure. And pressure always finds a way out. Freud figured this out over a century ago, and it's still true. What you suppress doesn't disappear into some vault of forgotten things. It transforms. It always transforms. It intensifies. It gets heavier with every day you refuse to acknowledge it. That's what's been happening to them. Every attempt to ignore you made you more vivid. Every effort to walk away pulled them further in. Every distraction they tried just collapsed the moment they needed it most. And they know this is happening. They can feel it. But knowing it and accepting are two completely different things. The mind is incredible at this equation. You can feel something deeply and still pretend it doesn't exist. You can wait someone desperately and convince yourself you don't care. You can experience something that fundamentally shifts who you are, while still acting like nothing has changed. Most people do this their entire lives. Yeah, they get really good at it. But there is a limit to how long they can last. That can last. Last night they hit that limit. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a moment where they suddenly threw their arms up and said, "I surrender." It was quieter than that, more unsettling. They just woke up this morning and couldn't find the usual mechanism anymore. The walls felt thinner, the justifications felt hollow, the logic that used to hold everything together just didn't work anymore. And in that moment, in that specific moment, that exact moment when the defenses stopped working, you appeared in their mind, not as a memory, but as a reckoning. Not something they could dismiss or minimize or rationalize away, just undeniable, real, present. Here is what makes this so destabilizing. Yeah, this is so destabilizing. And they didn't choose this moment. They didn't decide to suddenly feel everything at once. It happened to them, which means they lost control of their own emotional landscape. And that loss of control is probably terrifying them right now in ways they can't even articulate. Because people fear emotions, sure, but what they really fear is what emotions reveal about them. What they feel for you exposes something they have kept hidden even from themselves, that they are capable of being affected, that they can't control everything, that they are vulnerable to something they didn't predict and can't manage. For months, they have been telling themselves a story that this is temporary, that it means nothing serious, that they can feel this way and never act on it, that they are strong enough to contain this indefinitely. But that story just ended. And now they are standing in a reality where none of those reassuring lies work anymore. What they couldn't admit yesterday, has become what controls them today. And that's where it gets complicated. The moment someone stops being able to deny something, the pressure shifts. It's no longer abstract. It's not happening in the theoretical future. It's happening right now, in their body, in their thoughts, in the way they can't focus on anything else. They are physically experiencing the weight of what they have been suppressing. You know that feeling? You know that feeling when you are trying to hold something underwater and you can feel it fighting? The way it takes more and more energy to keep it down. That's what's happening inside them right now. Every moment they try to maintain the facade, they are spending energy that could go somewhere else. They are exhausted from pretending, and exhaustion makes pretense impossible. This is where their behavior is starting to shift in ways even they don't fully understand. They become inconsistent, unpredictable, pulled between impulse and restraint. One moment they feel drawn toward you, wanting to end this tension, wanting to face it. The next moment, a louder, more conditioned voice says, "Hold back, protect yourself, stay safe." Neither side is winning, neither side is letting go, and that intentional conflict is destroying them quietly. Because you can't live in constant contradiction forever. The mind isn't built for it. It creates a psychological dissonance that becomes unbearable. Psychological issues. Every moment of pretense feels false. Every attempt at normalcy falls apart. Every interaction becomes loaded with subtext they are desperately trying to hide, while simultaneously failing to hide it. And here is the thing about avoidance that most people don't understand. Avoidance doesn't weaken a real connection. Distance doesn't dilute genuine feeling. If anything, it does the opposite. Absence removes all the distractions. It takes away the easy escapes. And when distractions disappear, only truth remains, raw, undeniable truth. So they have been trying to maintain distance, trying to slow something that's accelerating inside them, trying to create space that would somehow make this smaller, more manageable. But every day that space has just been replaced by more thought of you, more feeling, more inability to pretend. The subconscious doesn't care about timing. It ignores logic completely. It only responds to what holds emotional significance. And you've crossed that line into emotional significance, which means you are no longer optional in their mind. You exist in there permanently, not as a choice, but as a fact of their psychological landscape. And once something becomes a fact of how someone's mind works, you can't unknown it. You just can't. You can't go back to ignorance. You can't return to numbness. You can try. Of course you can try. But every attempt just reinforces how aware you've become. Awareness doesn't fade. It sharpens. This is the part where things accelerate. Because what started as a feeling has become a certainty. What began as attraction has evolved into something closer to attachment. And attachment is threatening to someone who's spent their whole life avoiding vulnerability. Attachment means dependence. Yeah, attachment means dependence. And dependence means risk. Risk means loss is possible. But here's the truth that I know that nobody wants to admit out loud, actually. You don't fear what you don't value. They are not afraid because this doesn't matter. They are terrified precisely because it matters so much. Because losing you would mean losing something real. And that makes you dangerous to them in the best and worst ways. So they isolate, they lean in emotional and pull back mentally. They imagine what this could become and then convince themselves it is too much, too complex, too overwhelming. They try to find the balance point between feeling you and protecting themselves. But there is no balance point. You can't partially surrender to something this profound. You can only delay it. And delay always demands a cost. Suppressed emotion doesn't just disappear. It transforms into tension, into restlessness, into this constant internal noise they can't silence. It shows up. Yeah, it shows up in their focus, their mood, their reactions to things completely unrelated to you. Because somewhere beneath everything, an unresolved truth is rising. And it's demanding something they are not yet ready to give. But readiness is becoming. is becoming irrelevant right now, because they are approaching something psychologically that they can't avoid anymore. And what I know, once a feeling moves from conscious doubt into subconscious certainty, it stops asking for permission. It demands recognition. And that's what happened last night. That moment when they couldn't push it away anymore. When the internal division became so painful that maintaining it felt worse than confronting it. Acceptance doesn't bring peace immediately. That's the thing nobody tells you. When someone finally stops fighting what they feel, it doesn't calm them down. It does the opposite. It creates urgency, because now they can't pretend the question doesn't exist. What does this mean? What changed now? What do they risk if they keep avoiding? And these aren't theoretical questions anymore. They are immediate, pressing, real. They are beginning to understand something deeply unsettling. You are no longer just someone in their life. You are someone within their inner world. And that distinction changes everything. External things can be avoided, dismissed, replaced, but internal realities follow you into silence, into sleep, into every moment they believed was just theirs. That's why every moment of silence feels charged right now. Every interaction carries weight. Every thought of you carries implications, because they know now, not vaguely but completely, they know what they feel. They know how deep it goes. They know it's not going away. And knowing is the point of no return. Because once the mind truly knows something, it doesn't let go. It can't. The brain doesn't work that way. You can suppress knowledge, yeah, of course you can. You can refuse to act on it. But you can't unknown what you've already understood. The door only opens one direction. This is where this pressure becomes almost unbearable, because they have to face the gap between what they feel and what they are willing to admit, between what they want and what they think is safe, between the version of themselves that avoids you and the version of themselves that feels you. And they can't sustain both forever. eventually one of them has to give. Last night they felt that threshold approaching, that moment when avoidance stops being a shield and becomes a prison, when the cost of staying away becomes heavier than the cost of moving forward. This is the point where the internal conflict starts to shift. Not resolve yet, but shift. Because they are starting to recognize their own patterns. They catch themselves avoiding, deflecting, distracting, whenever something gets too close to the truth. And once you see your own avoidance clearly, you can't unsee it. That awareness is uncomfortable. It strips away the illusion of control. So now they are running out of places to hide within themselves. They can't return to ignorance. No, they can't return to ignorance. They can't go back to numbness. They can't go back to before this moment, because something fundamental has shifted. And that shift is demanding resolution. Not someday, not eventually, soon, because the mind can't sustain this level of internal contradiction forever. It will choose. And they are standing right at the edge, closer than they want to admit. One more moment of clarity, one more collapse of resistance, and they won't be able to hold it back. This is what happens when repression reaches its limit. It's not that they have suddenly become brave or ready. It's that holding back has become unbearable. The pain of avoiding is now greater than the fear of facing it. That's the threshold they have crossed tonight. Here is what's happening at the deepest level. They are experiencing what Freud called the return of the repressed. The return of the repressed. What you push down doesn't stay down. It transforms, it intensifies, it demands expression. And right now, that expression is becoming unavoidable. Unavoidable. Their mind is no longer asking questions like, do I feel this? That question is gone. Now the question is, what am I going to do with this? And that's the question that terrifies them. Because action means exposure. Exposure means vulnerability. Vulnerability means surrendering control. But here is the truth they are starting to accept. You cannot control something that has already transformed you. And they have been transformed. Not superficially, not temporarily, but fundamentally. in how they experience connection, in how they understand emotion, in how they know, in how they feel your absence even when you are not there. Your absence has become louder than your presence ever was. That's what's breaking them. Not simply missing you. Not simply missing you, but feeling you regardless. Feeling you in the way they approach other people and find them lacking. Feeling you in the way they try to focus on other things and fail. Feeling you in their quiet moments when all the distractions have finally stopped. And that comparison is slowly dismantling their defenses, because now everything else feels less intense, less real, less meaningful. And that forces a truth they tried to avoid. This can't be replaced. This isn't something they can move past and find an equivalent. This is singular. That recognition is where the quiet panic begins to rise. Not loud, not visible, but slow and creeping. Because if something can't be replaced, then losing it becomes genuinely catastrophic. And the fear of losing something real is infinitely more powerful than the fear of never having it. This is where their behavior becomes increasingly inconsistent. It's not that they are trying to hurt you or play games. It is that they are genuinely torn between two really impossible impulses. One part of them wants to move toward you, to end the tension, to face it, to silence the internal noise. But other part keeps insisting they hold back, protect themselves, avoid what feels too overwhelming. And this conflict is exhausting them. It's visible if you know where to look. It shows in how they interact, how they respond, how they oscillate between closeness and distance. But here is what's changing right now, tonight. Yeah, tonight. They are beginning to see that the thing protecting them is also what's destroying them. Avoidance was supposed to keep them safe. Instead, it made them unsafe within their own mind. They are not in peace. They are not at peace. They are in constant internal warfare. And at some point, every human brain decides that inner peace is worth more than outer protection. That living honestly inside yourself matters more than looking safe on the outside. That's the shift they are making tonight. This is where it stops being about what they feel and starts being about who they are. Because the version of them that keeps avoiding you is not aligned with the version that knows what they feel. And living as two different people is impossible. Eventually, authenticity demands integration. They can resist. They can resist action. They can delay the external expression of what they feel. But they can't. They can't stop the internal alignment from happening. The mind will choose consistency eventually. The psyche will demand coherence. And right now, the psyche is refusing to stay split anymore. That's why tonight feels different. Yeah, that's why this morning felt like a breaking point. It's not that something began. It is that something finally became undeniable. Yeah, undeniable. All the walls have been slowly eroding, and last night the final ones gave way. Not all at once, not dramatically, just finally, completely, irreversibly. What they feel for you is no longer fragile. It's no longer something they can simply walk away from without losing something essential within themselves. It exists fully, undeniably, and existence doesn't disappear just because it's inconvenient. So now it becomes a matter of time, just a matter of time. Not if, not maybe, not someday. Time, because the truth has already taken hold inside them. And once truth takes hold internally, the outside world simply follows behind. It's inevitable, not immediately necessarily, but unavoidable. This is where the breaking point solidifies. Because they can't go back to numbness. They can't return to ignorance. They can't unsee what they have seen about themselves, about you, about what this actually means. Every day they maintain distance. It feels more artificial. Every moment of pretense feels like a quiet betrayal of themselves. Every attempt at normalcy feels hollow, because inside they are not normal anymore. Inside they have already accepted it. And that internal acceptance is the real shift. The external action will follow. But the thing that's changed is already done. They know what they feel. They are no longer questioning it. They are no longer minimizing it. They have crossed from doubt into certainty. And certainty changes everything. Because now every moment of silence feels wrong. Every second of distance feels unnatural. Every pretense falls apart the moment they try to construct it. This is where everything converges. The pressure, the awareness, the emotion, the fear, all of it collapsing into one unavoidable realization. They cannot continue like this. They just cannot continue like this. Something has to change. And when that realization locks into place, action stops being optional. It becomes inevitable, not necessarily immediate, but unavoidable. Because you can delay action. You can delay action, but you can't delay transformation. And they have already been transformed. Once the internal world shifts this deeply, the external world must eventually follow. There is no other path forward. Because human beings can't sustain internal inauthenticity forever. The gap between who they are and who they are pretending to be gets too painful. That's the breaking point they have hit tonight. Not tomorrow, not eventually, tonight. Here is what's actually true about what they are feeling right now. It's not confusion anymore. It's not uncertainty. It's not something they need to think through or work out or understand better. They understand it perfectly. Yeah, they understand it perfectly. What they feel is clear. What it means is clear. What's terrifying is what has to come next. Because acceptance isn't the end of this story. It's the beginning. It's the moment where everything that's been internal starts to demand external expression. And they feel that demand building. They feel the urgency. They feel the weight of what they are holding becoming impossible, really impossible to carry alone. Most people never mention this part. The moment someone truly accepts what they feel, they don't find peace. They find restlessness, they find a constant pull toward movement, because clarity doesn't come, it compels. And right now, they are caught in that pull, trying to contain it, trying to manage it, trying to delay what already feels inevitable. But here is the final truth. You can suppress action. You can resist expression. You can push back against what lives inside you. But you can't remove what has already taken root. What they feel for you is no longer temporary. It's no longer something they can outgrow or get over or move past. It's foundational now. It's part of how they understand themselves and connection and what matters in this world. This existence is permanent, and existence demands acknowledgement. This is the moment everything changes, not because they have made some grand declaration, but because inside where truth lives without permission, something has shifted irreversibly. They know what they feel. They know it matters. They know it's not going away. And now they have to figure out what to do with that knowledge. That's the choice. That's the choice they are facing tonight. Not whether they feel it. That's decided. That's already decided. Not whether it's real. That's decided. The choice is what comes next. And they are closer to making that choice than they realize. Because staying in this space of knowing and not acting has become psychologically unbearable. You can endure pain. You can tolerate fear. But you cannot continue betraying your own deepest truth forever. Eventually, alignment demands to be achieved, and they are reaching that point of no return. Tonight, they finally accepted it, and that acceptance is going to change everything. Because once someone stops pretending, once they stop fighting what they feel, once they surrender to the truth of it, they become someone different, someone more authentic, someone more dangerous, someone who can no longer be denied or dismissed or kept at a comfortable distance. This is what it means when someone truly accepts their feelings. It's not the end of the story. It's the beginning. It's the beginning of a completely different one.